You say less than the room expects. You do not rush to explain yourself. You do not fill every pause. You do not hand people the full map of your thoughts just to make them comfortable. And almost every time, the same thing happens. Someone starts reading your silence as attitude. They call you cold. They call you distant. They decide you think you are above them. They do not say, "This man is disciplined." They say, "This man is arrogant." If you have felt that sting, then you already know the pain in this video, because it is a strange kind of punishment. You are not attacking anyone. You are not trying to dominate the room. You are simply refusing to overperform for comfort. And somehow, that alone is enough to make insecure people uncomfortable. But here is what most people never understand. What they call arrogance is often not ego at all. It is silent authority. It is the authority of a person who does not leak himself on demand, who does not turn every silence into a performance, who does not hand out instant access just because other people feel nervous in the quiet. Machiavelli understood this clearly. The moment people cannot quickly read you, soothe themselves through you, or place you in a harmless little box, they begin to resent the control they no longer have. So, in this video, I am going to show you the 7 silent authority traits that make people misread your restraint as arrogance. And if this puts words to something you have felt for years, subscribe now, because this channel is built for people who are done performing just to make anxious minds comfortable. Most people feel safe only when they can map you quickly. They want to know what you think, how you feel, where they stand, and how much access they have. When you give them that too fast, they relax. When you do not, they react. That reaction is the real subject of this video, because what unsettles them is not your silence itself. It is what your silence represents: self-containment, selective access, and a mind they cannot casually enter. And once you understand that, your silence stops looking like a flaw. It starts looking like authority. The first sign of silent authority is simple, but most people never learn it. You do not explain yourself to feel safe. Most people explain far too early. They explain why they said no. They explain why they left early. They explain why they disagree. They explain why they are not available. They explain not because the explanation is necessary, but because they are afraid of what happens if the room does not approve. That fear shapes the entire interaction. The more you explain for safety, the more you teach people that your decisions require their emotional permission. Your no starts sounding negotiable. Your boundaries start sounding apologetic. Your preferences start sounding like something you still need to justify. And once that happens, people stop treating your decisions like decisions. They start treating them like openings. But when you stop explaining for safety, the room feels something different. You answer cleanly. You decline cleanly. You hold a preference without building a courtroom around it. You let your decision remain standing on its own legs. That is exactly what many people misread as arrogance, because the average person has been trained to believe that if you do not explain yourself at length, you must think you are too important to do so. But that is not what is happening. What they are feeling is the removal of access. Machiavelli understood that a man who constantly justifies himself places his autonomy in the hands of whoever is listening. A man who speaks with finality does something else. He teaches people that his inner authority is not up for group management. That is why this trait feels so sharp to others. You are not insulting them. You are simply refusing to put your decisions on trial. And to people who are used to emotional access as a right, that feels almost offensive. But it is not arrogance. It is self-command. And once you stop explaining yourself for safety, something else becomes impossible to ignore. You stop using words to protect your place in the room. That is where silence stops looking accidental and starts becoming structural. The second trait is where most people reveal how deeply they depend on approval. You don't fill silence to ease other people. A pause enters the room. A conversation stalls. Someone says something awkward, and suddenly the air gets heavy. Most people panic there. They laugh too quickly. They throw in filler words. They start over-explaining. They offer extra warmth, extra anecdotes, extra personality, all to rescue the moment from discomfort. Why? Because silence exposes nervous systems. The person who cannot survive 5 quiet seconds without performing almost always speaks from anxiety, not authority. But you do something else. You let the silence remain. You do not rush to entertain the room back into comfort. You do not volunteer extra words just because somebody else is uncomfortable. You do not take responsibility for every social gap that appears in front of you. And people feel that immediately. They feel that you are not afraid of the pause. They feel that you are not volunteering yourself to repair every awkward moment. They feel that your composure does not depend on constant noise. That is exactly what many of them misread as coldness or arrogance. Because when you refuse to rescue other people from social discomfort, they are forced to sit with themselves. And insecure people often experience that as rejection. But it is not rejection. It is restraint. It is the quiet refusal to turn your dignity into a tool for keeping other people comfortable. By now, the pattern should be getting clearer. They do not hate your silence itself. They hate what your silence refuses to give them. Easy comfort, easy access, and easy reassurance. And once you stop rescuing the room from discomfort, your words begin changing value too. The third trait changes how people experience your words. You speak only when it matters. Most people speak to maintain position, to prove they are engaged, to prove they are sharp, to prove they exist. They repeat obvious points. They interrupt with weak additions. They react before they have thought, because they are afraid that if they wait too long, their presence will disappear. That is why so much conversation feels inflated. It is not language used with precision. It is language used as social insurance. But when you speak only when it matters, your words carry a different weight. You are not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because you are not addicted to empty participation. You listen longer. You observe longer. You let other people reveal the quality of their thinking before you offer yours. Then, when you do speak, it lands differently. It has direction. It has shape. It moves the conversation instead of decorating it. And this is exactly where many people misread you. They assume your restraint means you think your voice is too important for the room. They read your selectivity as superiority. They confuse verbal scarcity with social arrogance. But that is not what is happening. You are simply not spending words to buy visibility. Machiavelli understood that language gains force when it is not overused. A man who speaks constantly teaches the room to discount him. A man who speaks with precision trains the room to pay attention when he finally does. That is not ego. That is authority through selectivity. This is where most people start misreading the entire pattern. Because once your words become selective, your quiet starts feeling heavier, and your restraint stops looking social. It starts looking intentional. At this point, maybe a part of you is asking the obvious question. Isn't this just coldness? Isn't this emotional distance dressed up as strength? No, coldness withdraws because it is afraid. Authority withholds because it is disciplined. One is avoidance, the other is control. That difference matters. And once you understand that difference, the next trait becomes obvious. Silence is not just about saying less. It is also about refusing to fake emotional access that was never real to begin with. This is where the misunderstanding becomes social. You don't perform warmth on demand. Some people expect instant friendliness, instant emotional availability, instant smiles, instant softening. They approach you with a level of ease you have not granted, and they expect you to mirror it back immediately. Most people do, not because it is real, because they do not want to look rude. So they exaggerate warmth. They oversmile. They overaffirm. They meet social pressure with performance, because performance is easier than boundaries. But you do not do that. You can be respectful without being overly warm. You can be civil without pretending instant closeness. You can acknowledge someone without handing them a false sense of immediate access. And this often bothers people more than open hostility would, because hostility is readable. Overt rejection is clear, but measured restraint, calm distance, politeness without emotional availability, that leaves insecure people with too much uncertainty, so they interpret it the easiest way they know how. They call it arrogance. They say, you think you are too good for people. They say you act above everyone. But what is really happening is simpler. You are refusing to counterfeit intimacy. You are refusing to manufacture warmth for people who have done nothing to earn your trust, your softness, or your private emotional energy. That is not arrogance. That is integrity. And the people who hate it most are usually the people who are used to getting quick access through charm, pressure, or performative friendliness. So the pattern goes deeper. You are not just withholding noise. You are regulating access. And once access is regulated, self-revelation changes too. The fifth trait is one of the deepest signs of silent authority. You reveal yourself in layers. Most people reveal themselves all at once, not because intimacy has been earned, but because they mistake self-exposure for connection. They overshare early. They hand out personal details too fast. They unload their history, their wounds, their emotional patterns, and their private mind to people who have not yet proven they can carry that information well. Then they wonder why they feel exposed, misread, or used. You move differently. You let time do some of the sorting. You do not hand strangers the private version of you just because the mood is friendly. You let people earn deeper access in stages. First, they get your surface. Then, maybe, your nuance. Then, over time, if they prove worthy, they get your interior. That layered self-revelation makes many people deeply uncomfortable, because now they cannot quickly map you. They cannot easily place you. They cannot tell whether they truly know where they stand. And rather than admit that uncertainty makes them anxious, they often translate it into a moral judgment. You are guarded. You are aloof. You are arrogant. But what they are really reacting to is disciplined access. Machiavelli understood that open exposure invites management. The more carelessly you reveal yourself, the easier you are to read, shape, flatter, or exploit. The man who reveals himself in layers does something very different. He makes intimacy move through proof instead of impulse. That is silent authority. Not because you are hiding, because you are choosing. By this point, people are no longer reacting to a single behavior. They are reacting to a structure they cannot easily enter. And when people cannot enter you easily, they start filling the gaps with projection. The sixth trait is uncomfortable for many people because it removes the usual chase. You let people project. In social life, people will always build stories about you. Why you are quiet. Why you left early. Why you are hard to read. Why you did not laugh. Why you did not explain. Why you did not open up. Most people cannot tolerate those stories. They rush to correct the misunderstanding. They clarify every impression. They overmanage perception because being misread feels unbearable to them. That reaction is understandable, but it also gives away enormous power. Because the more desperately you chase every projection, the more you communicate that other people's interpretations still have direct access to your peace. You do something different. You let some people misunderstand you. You let them build the wrong story. You let them project their insecurity, their resentment, or their need for easy categorization onto your silence. Not because perception never matters, but because chasing every misunderstanding is another form of submission. And that is where quiet authority sharpens. You stop treating every false reading like an emergency. You stop handing your time, your words, and your emotional steadiness to people who have already decided to read you through the lens of their own discomfort. Of course, they call this arrogance, because from the outside, restraint without correction looks like indifference. But from the inside, it is something else. It is the refusal to kneel before every projection that enters the room. That is a powerful shift. Once people realize you are not going to perform for their interpretation, they are forced to sit with the limits of their own access. And many of them do not handle that well. And that is where the misunderstanding becomes almost inevitable. Because once you stop chasing every false reading, people eventually run into one final limit. They realize not everyone gets emotional access to you. The final trait is the one that makes the whole pattern impossible to miss. You're not emotionally available to everyone. This is where many people turn on you the hardest. Because modern social life trains people to believe that availability is virtue. That if you are healthy, mature, empathetic, and evolved, you should always be open, always responsive, always ready to receive, soothe, and validate. But that is not wisdom. That is often just boundary collapse with polite language around it. You understand something most people learn too late. Emotional availability is not something to hand out indiscriminately. Your attention has a cost. Your empathy has a cost. Your listening has a cost. Your emotional presence has a cost. So you stop giving it to everyone. You stop acting like every person who arrives with energy, need, confusion, drama, or emotional hunger has automatically earned your deeper bandwidth. You become selective, and that triggers people more than almost anything else in this video. Because people can tolerate distance more easily than they can tolerate selective distance. Selective distance tells them something personal. It tells them access is earned. It tells them your inner world is not public property. It tells them they do not automatically qualify. And for insecure people, that feels insulting. So again, they call it arrogance. But it is not arrogance. It is the mature understanding that emotional openness without discernment turns your interior life into common ground. And common ground gets walked on. Machiavelli would have understood this clearly. Anything valuable that is left unguarded eventually stops being valued. Your emotional availability is no different. Now, step back for a second. What looks separate on the surface is actually one pattern. Not silence for style, not distance for ego, structure. Now, step back and look at the pattern. You do not explain yourself for safety. You do not spend words rescuing silence. You do not perform warmth just to keep other people comfortable. You reveal yourself in layers. You let projections stay with the people projecting. And you stop handing emotional access to everyone who demands it. Do you see what that creates? Not a colder man. Not a crueler man. A man whose interior life is no longer open to casual handling. That is the shift most people misread. They think authority always looks loud. They think confidence always looks outward. They think power must be visible to be real. But some of the strongest authority a man can carry is the quiet kind. The kind that makes people slow down around him. The kind that makes them feel they have not earned the right to speak too loosely, ask too deeply, or assume too much. The kind that never needs to announce itself because it is already felt as structure. And structure is exactly what anxious people call arrogance when they can no longer get easy access. Now, here is the trap. Weak men hear ideas like these and turn them into performance. They try to look mysterious. They become stiff. They act colder than they really are. They use silence like theater and distance like costume. That is not authority. That is insecurity wearing darker clothes. Because if your silence is only a strategy to make people chase you, fear you, or wonder about you, then you are still orbiting their reactions. You are still being controlled by perception. Real silent authority is quieter than that. It does not need to look deep. It does not need to act hard. It simply stops making itself cheaply available. So what do you do with this? First, stop over-explaining yourself for safety. Let simple decisions remain simple. Not every preference needs a defense. Not every boundary needs a speech. Second, stop filling silence just to make other people comfortable. Let pauses breathe. Let awkwardness expose who actually needs noise to feel secure. Do not turn your dignity into a tool for managing the room. Third, regulate access with more intention. Reveal yourself in layers. Let people project without chasing every misunderstanding. And stop being emotionally available to everyone who asks for a piece of you. Do that long enough, and your silence stops feeling like a social liability. It starts feeling like structure. That is the real shift. What they call arrogance is often just a man who has stopped making himself easy to enter. Machiavelli understood that anything valuable loses force the moment it becomes too accessible. Your silence unsettles people for the same reason. It reminds them that not everyone gets immediate access. Not everyone gets instant warmth. Not everyone gets the private version of you just because they want it. And that is the part insecure people hate. Because once your silence stops asking to be understood, it starts setting terms. That is silent authority. If this put words to something you have felt for years, like the video and stay with it. Share it with someone who keeps over-explaining himself just to make other people comfortable. Subscribe if you want more on Machiavelli, silence, authority, and psychological power. And if this hit home, leave this in the comments. I don't over-explain.